Minute 1. Sarah Mitchell entered the tight passage. Minute 2. She realized she couldn't turn around. Minute 5. The panic attack started. Minute 10. Her body went into complete paralysis. For the next 6 hours, she was trapped inside her own frozen body, wedged in 18 inches of rock with no way out. Welcome to Cave Stories, where we examine real cave accidents and the critical mistakes that turned adventure into a psychological nightmare. Sarah Mitchell had been claustrophobic for as long as she could remember. Not mildly uncomfortable in small spaces, but genuinely deeply phobic. Elevators made her sweat. Crowded subway cars triggered panic attacks. MRI machines were impossible. She'd tried once and lasted 30 seconds before screaming to be let out. She avoided tight clothing, small rooms, anywhere that made her feel confined or trapped. It was a limitation she'd learned to live with, working around it, managing her life to minimize exposure to triggering situations. And she'd certainly never, ever considered going into a cave. But on September 15th, 2019, Sarah's best friend Amanda convinced her to try caving. Just once, just to see. What happened over the next 6 hours would validate every fear Sarah had ever had about enclosed spaces and prove that sometimes your phobias are trying to protect you from real danger. Amanda Rodriguez had discovered caving 2 years earlier and loved it. She found the underground world peaceful, the darkness calming, the challenge of navigating tight passages meditative. She'd been trying to get Sarah to try caving for months, insisting that exposure therapy was the best way to overcome phobias. If Sarah could just experience a cave and realize it wasn't that bad, maybe she could finally conquer her claustrophobia. Amanda meant well. She genuinely thought she was helping her friend. But this belief, this assumption that phobias can be cured through forced exposure, was mistake number 1. On September 10th, Amanda's boyfriend Trevor organized a caving trip to Serpent's Crawl Cave in southwestern Virginia. It was a beginner-friendly cave, Trevor explained, with easy passages and only 1 or 2 tight squeezes. Perfect for introducing someone to caving. Amanda saw her opportunity. She invited Sarah, along with their mutual friend Melissa. "Come on, Sarah, it'll be fun. You trust me, right? I wouldn't take you anywhere dangerous, and if you hate it, we'll turn back immediately." No pressure. Sarah's gut told her no. Every instinct screamed that going into a cave was a terrible idea for someone with claustrophobia. But Amanda was her best friend, the person who'd supported her through a difficult divorce, through depression, through career changes. Sarah felt she owed Amanda. Felt guilty for always saying no to Amanda's invitations to outdoor adventures. And Amanda was so insistent, so certain that this would be good for Sarah, that Sarah finally, reluctantly, agreed. This decision, agreeing to do something she knew was wrong for her, was mistake number 2. The days leading up to the trip, Sarah felt increasing dread. She tried to back out twice, texting Amanda with excuses. But Amanda wouldn't let her. "You're going to be fine. I promise. Trust me." Sarah wanted to trust her. Amanda had never steered her wrong before. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe her claustrophobia was just in her head and she could overcome it with willpower. These thoughts, this minimization of her own legitimate fears, was mistake number 3. On the morning of September 15th, Sarah almost didn't show up. She sat in her car at the meeting point, hands shaking, seriously considering just driving home and texting an apology. But then Amanda knocked on her window, smiling, excited. "You came. I'm so proud of you. This is going to be amazing." Sarah forced a smile back and got out of the car. She'd committed. She'd go through with it. How bad could it be? The drive to Serpent's Crawl Cave took 45 minutes. Trevor drove, explaining the cave as they went. It's a horizontal cave, so no vertical drops or anything scary like that. The passages are mostly wide enough to walk through. There's one section called the compression that's pretty tight, but it's only about 30 feet long and then it opens up again. If you don't want to do that part, you can wait while the rest of us go through." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety at the mention of a tight section, but didn't say anything. She didn't want to seem weak or difficult. They arrived at the trailhead at 9:30 a.m. The cave entrance was a 15-minute hike through beautiful Virginia forest. Sarah tried to enjoy the walk, the fresh air, the sunlight filtering through the trees. This might be the last pleasant moment for a while. Trevor handed out gear, helmets with mounted LED headlamps, knee pads, gloves, and small backpacks with water and snacks. He gave Sarah a basic safety briefing. Stay together. Always keep visual contact with at least one other person. If you feel uncomfortable, tell us immediately, and never force yourself through a passage that doesn't feel right. Sarah appreciated the safety talk, but it also increased her anxiety. Why did he need to emphasize not forcing through passages? How tight were these passages going to be? Amanda noticed Sarah's expression and squeezed her hand. "You're going to be fine. I'll be right with you the whole time." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her heart was already beating faster, her palms sweating despite the cool morning air. The cave entrance was an unassuming hole in a limestone hillside, about 4 feet high and 5 feet wide. Trevor went in first, followed by Melissa, then Amanda, with Sarah bringing up the rear. The moment Sarah ducked through the entrance and felt the rock close around her, she knew this was a mistake. Her chest tightened immediately. Her breathing became shallow, but she was already inside and the others were moving forward, and she didn't want to be the person who made them turn around after 30 seconds. So she followed, her headlamp beam shaking slightly as she crawled forward. The first section of Serpent's Crawl Cave was manageable. The passage was about 6 feet wide and 4 feet high, requiring crawling but not claustrophobic. Sarah focused on Amanda's feet ahead of her, following mechanically, trying not to think about the tons of rock above her head. Her rational mind knew the cave was stable, had been stable for millions of years, wasn't going to collapse. But her phobic mind didn't care about rational arguments. Her phobic mind was screaming at her to get out, to escape, that she was in danger. After 20 minutes of crawling, the passage opened into a small chamber about 10 feet across. Trevor stopped here to let everyone rest and hydrate. He pointed his light at a passage leading off to the right. "That's the compression. It's the tightest part of the cave. You have to go through on your belly, kind of a swimming motion. It's about 30 feet long, maybe a minute or two to get through. Beyond that is a beautiful chamber with formations, really worth seeing. Who wants to try it?" Sarah looked at the passage Trevor was indicating. Even from the entrance, she could see it was tight. Really tight. The kind of tight that made her throat close up just looking at it. She opened her mouth to say she'd wait here, that the others should go ahead without her. But before she could speak, Amanda said, "Sarah and I will go through together." "Right, Sarah? It'll be easier if you follow right behind me. You can do this." Sarah felt trapped. Not physically, not yet, but socially. She'd already committed to this trip, had already inconvenienced everyone by being the nervous one. If she backed out now, she'd be the weak link, the person who ruined the adventure. The pressure to conform, to not disappoint her friends, overrode her screaming instincts to refuse. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll try." This was mistake number 4, and it was the catastrophic one. Sarah knew, absolutely knew, that going into that passage was wrong. Her body was telling her in every possible way. Elevated heart rate, sweating, trembling, nausea, the overwhelming urge to flee. These weren't just nerves. These were genuine warning signals that her psychological limits were about to be exceeded. But she ignored them. She let social pressure override survival instinct. And she was about to pay a terrible price. Amanda went into the compression first. Sarah watched her friend's legs disappear into the narrow slot, heard her voice echoing back. "It's tight but doable. Just keep moving and you'll be through before you know it." Trevor nodded encouragingly at Sarah. "You've got this. Just remember to breathe." Sarah approached the entrance to the compression on shaking legs. The passage was 18 inches wide. Sarah was 5 feet 4 inches and slim, so technically she could fit. But 18 inches meant her shoulders would touch both walls simultaneously. There would be no room to move her arms. She'd be sliding through on her belly with her arms extended in front of her, unable to turn around, unable to back up easily, committed to forward movement until she reached the other end 30 feet away. Looking at that narrow slot of darkness, Sarah felt the first real stirrings of panic. "This is a bad idea," her mind whispered. "Don't do this." But Amanda was already through and calling for her. "Come on, Sarah. You can do it." And Melissa and Trevor were behind her, waiting, watching. Sarah got down on her belly at the entrance to the compression. She extended her arms forward into the passage, feeling the cool limestone walls brush her shoulders. Her headlamp illuminated the passage ahead. Smooth rock walls, a gentle downward slope, no visible end. Just 30 feet of tunnel barely wider than her body. She took a deep breath, exhaled, and pushed herself forward into the passage. Minute 1. Sarah Mitchell entered the tight passage. The first 10 feet weren't terrible, uncomfortable, claustrophobic, but manageable. She could push with her toes, pull with her fingers, make forward progress. Amanda's voice ahead of her was encouraging. "You're doing great. Almost halfway." Sarah focused on that voice, used it as an anchor. She could do this. Just 20 more feet, then 15. Then, minute 2. She realized she couldn't turn around. The passage walls were pressing against her shoulders, her hips, her entire body. She tried experimentally to twist, to see if she could rotate and crawl backward. She couldn't. The space was too tight. She was committed now. Forward was the only option. This realization sent the first spike of real fear through her system. She was trapped. Not trapped in the sense of stuck, but trapped in the sense of having no escape route except forward. Her breathing quickened. Minute 3. Sarah pushed forward another few feet, and the passage narrowed slightly. Now the walls weren't just touching her shoulders. They were pressing against them with enough force to restrict her movement. She had to exhale to make forward progress, sliding a few inches with each breath cycle. Inhale, stuck. Exhale, slide forward. Inhale, stuck. Exhale, slide forward. The rhythm was claustrophobic and terrifying. Her heart rate spiked to 120 beats per minute. Minute 4. Amanda's voice came from ahead, but it sounded distant now, echoing strangely in the tight passage. "You're almost there. Just a little further." But Sarah couldn't see Amanda. Her headlamp beam showed only rock walls on either side, inches from her face. She couldn't see the end of the passage. She couldn't see daylight or escape. She could only see rock, endless rock, pressing in on all sides. Her rational mind was losing the battle against her phobic mind. The panic was building, a crescendo of fear that was about to break. Minute 5. The panic attack started. It wasn't gradual. It was sudden and overwhelming, a switch flipping in Sarah's brain from anxious to terrified. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, hyperventilation starting. Her heart rate jumped to 150, pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her hands started shaking. Sweat broke out all over her body despite the cool cave temperature. And worst of all, her muscles started to tense, her body preparing for fight or flight in a situation where neither was possible. Sarah tried to keep moving forward, but her body wasn't cooperating anymore. Her muscles were rigid with tension. Her hands were gripping the rock floor so hard her fingers hurt, but she couldn't make them release and push. Her breathing was coming in gasps now, not enough oxygen reaching her lungs. She managed to call out, her voice high and strained. "Amanda, I can't do this. I need to get out." Amanda's voice came back immediately. "You're okay. You're almost through. Just a few more feet." But Amanda couldn't see Sarah. She couldn't see that her friend was in the grip of a full panic attack, that Sarah's body was shutting down. Amanda thought Sarah was just nervous, just needed encouragement. This miscommunication, this inability to understand the severity of Sarah's distress, was a critical failure point. Minute 6. Sarah tried to back up. She couldn't go forward anymore. The panic was too overwhelming. She needed to retreat, to get back to the wider passage behind her. But backing up in an 18-inch passage when you're in full panic is nearly impossible. You can't see where you're going. You can't get leverage with your feet. And Sarah's body, flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, wasn't responding to commands anymore. She pushed backward with her hands and gained maybe an inch before her hips wedged against the walls and she stopped moving. She was stuck. Not stuck in the sense of physically trapped by narrow rock, but stuck in the sense that her panicked, uncoordinated movements couldn't generate enough force to move her body backward. And forward was psychologically impossible. Sarah's mind, already fragile with panic, began to fragment. She started screaming. Not words, just raw sound, the sound of someone whose worst fear has come true. Minute 7. Behind Sarah in the wider passage, Trevor heard the screaming and immediately understood they had a problem. He called into the compression. Sarah, stop moving. Just stay still. We're going to help you." But Sarah couldn't hear him over her own screaming, over the roaring in her ears, over the overwhelming panic that was drowning out everything else. Minute 8. Amanda, who'd made it through the compression and was in the chamber on the other side, realized Sarah wasn't just nervous. She was in genuine distress. She tried to crawl back through the passage to reach Sarah, but the passage only allowed one-way traffic. She couldn't fit past Sarah. She could only call to her, her voice mixing with Trevor and Melissa's from behind, a cacophony of voices that Sarah's panicked brain couldn't process. Minute 9. Sarah's screaming had subsided into sobbing. She was gulping air in huge gasps, hyperventilating severely now. Her fingers and toes were tingling, numbness spreading from the extremities. This was the physiological effect of hyperventilation. Too much oxygen out, too much carbon dioxide blown off, blood pH changing, nervous system responding. But to Sarah's panicked mind, the numbness felt like she was dying, like her body was shutting down. The panic intensified further. Minute 10. Sarah's body went into complete paralysis. This wasn't a physical injury or a mechanical problem. This was conversion disorder, a psychological condition where severe anxiety manifests as physical symptoms. Sarah's muscles, flooded with stress hormones, locked up completely. She couldn't move her arms. She couldn't move her legs. She couldn't even turn her head. Her body had essentially frozen in place, a protective response to overwhelming stress that left her rigid and immobile in the middle of an 18-inch passage with no way forward and no way back. For Sarah, this was the ultimate nightmare. She was trapped inside her own body, trapped inside the rock, unable to move, unable to escape, barely able to breathe. Her conscious mind was still present, still aware, but completely divorced from physical control. She could hear Amanda calling from ahead, Trevor shouting instructions from behind, but she couldn't respond. She could only lie there, rigid and frozen, experiencing the full horror of complete helplessness. Trevor, positioned in the wider passage behind Sarah, quickly realized this was no ordinary panic attack. He'd seen nervous cavers before, people who got uncomfortable in tight spaces but could be talked through it. This was different. Sarah wasn't responding to verbal cues. She wasn't moving at all. He shone his light down the passage and could see her legs, completely still, not even the slight movement of breathing. "Sarah," he called urgently. "Can you hear me? Wiggle your toes if you can hear me." No response, no movement whatsoever. Trevor made a critical assessment. They had a caver in full psychological crisis, possibly in medical distress, wedged in an 18-inch passage with no easy extraction method. This required professional help immediately. He pulled out his radio. They'd left radios at regular intervals through the cave, a standard safety practice, though they'd thought it was overkill for such a simple trip. Now that overkill might save Sarah's life. "Cave rescue. This is Trevor Walsh in Serpent's Crawl Cave. We have an emergency. Female, age 28, trapped in the compression passage, unresponsive. Possible medical emergency. We need extraction team immediately." The radio operator on the surface responded within 30 seconds. "Copy that. What's the nature of the medical emergency?" Trevor tried to explain. "She's claustrophobic. She went into a panic attack in the tight passage, and now she's not moving at all. She's not responding to verbal commands. I can't tell if she's conscious. We need someone who knows how to handle psychological emergencies in confined spaces." The operator knew exactly what this situation required. Virginia Cave Rescue had dealt with panic-induced paralysis before, though it was rare. They needed not just technical rescue capability, but psychological intervention. "Stand by. We're activating the full response team including medical and psych support. ETA approximately 90 minutes to reach your position. Can you maintain contact with the victim?" 90 minutes. To Sarah, frozen in the passage, even 90 seconds felt eternal, but Trevor confirmed. "We'll stay with her. Just get here fast." He switched his focus back to Sarah, his voice deliberately calm and steady. "Sarah, this is Trevor. Help is coming. Professional rescuers are on their way. You're not alone. We're right here with you. Just try to breathe slowly, in through your nose, out through your mouth. You're going to be okay." Sarah could hear Trevor's voice, distant and echoey as if coming through water. A small part of her mind, the rational part that was still functioning, registered that he was trying to help. But the overwhelming majority of her consciousness was consumed by pure, primal terror. She was trapped. She couldn't move. The walls were touching her on all sides. She couldn't escape. She was going to die here, suffocated by rock and fear. Her breathing remained rapid and shallow, her body rigid as stone. Amanda, in the chamber beyond the compression, was experiencing her own crisis. This was her fault. She'd pressured Sarah into coming, had insisted her friend could overcome her phobia, had led her into this passage despite knowing about the claustrophobia. The guilt was overwhelming. She lay at the exit of the compression, her face near the opening, calling to Sarah continuously. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please hang on. Help is coming. Please don't hate me." But there was no response from the dark passage. Melissa, who'd been bringing up the rear and was still in the larger passage with Trevor, asked the question they were all thinking. "Can we pull her out?" Trevor considered this carefully. Technically, yes, they could try to pull Sarah backward by her ankles, but Sarah was completely rigid, her body locked in place. Pulling someone who can't cooperate, who can't relax their muscles or help with the movement, risks serious injury. They could dislocate her shoulders, damage her spine, cause abrasions and contusions from scraping against rock. And if they started pulling and she got stuck, they'd have made the situation worse. No, Trevor decided. We wait for the professionals. They'll have the equipment and expertise to do this safely. At 12:05 p.m., 33 minutes after Sarah had entered the compression, the first rescue personnel arrived at the cave entrance on the surface. Captain James Norton led a team of 8 cave rescue specialists, including Officer Rachel Cooper, a paramedic with specialized training in confined space rescue and psychological emergencies. They'd brought equipment specifically designed for this type of situation. Rescue harnesses, low-profile hauling systems, medical supplies, and most critically, Dr. Patricia Barnes, a psychiatrist who volunteered with Cave Rescue and specialized in anxiety disorders. Captain Norton got a briefing from Trevor via radio while the team geared up. "Okay, Trevor. Give me the exact situation. How tight is this passage?" Trevor described the compression: 18 inches wide, 30 feet long, gentle downward slope, smooth walls. Victim is approximately 15 feet into the passage. She's been immobile for about 30 minutes now. We believe she's conscious but in severe psychological distress. Dr. Barnes took the radio. "Trevor, this is Dr. Patricia Barnes, psychiatrist with the rescue team. I need you to describe exactly what happened before she stopped moving." Trevor recounted the timeline, entered the passage, seemed okay initially, then started hyperventilating, then screaming, then went completely silent and still. Dr. Barnes recognized the symptoms immediately. Classic panic attack escalating to conversion disorder, the body's shutdown response to overwhelming anxiety. "I need to get to her as soon as possible. Every minute she's trapped increases the psychological damage." The rescue team moved through Serpent's Crawl Cave as fast as safety allowed. They reached the chamber before the compression at 1:15 p.m., 103 minutes after Sarah had entered the passage. Dr. Barnes immediately positioned herself at the entrance to the compression where she could see Sarah's legs. "Sarah, my name is Dr. Patricia Barnes. I'm a doctor and I'm here to help you. Can you hear me?" No response. "Sarah, if you can hear me, I want you to try to wiggle your toes. Just your toes. Nothing else." Still no response. Dr. Barnes turned to Captain Norton. "She's either unconscious or locked in dissociative paralysis. Either way, we need to extract her immediately. What are our options?" Captain Norton assessed the situation. The passage was too narrow for anyone to get alongside Sarah or past her. They couldn't reach her upper body from behind. Their only option was to attach a harness or rope to her ankles and pull her backward through the passage. But doing this while she was rigid and unresponsive could cause injury. Officer Rachel Cooper, the confined space rescue specialist, proposed a solution. "We use the low-profile ankle harness. It's designed for exactly this situation. We can slip it onto her feet, tighten it around her ankles, and use the pulley system to apply steady, controlled force. If she's truly locked up, we'll be pulling dead weight, about 125 pounds. The pulley system gives us mechanical advantage and precise control. It's not ideal, but it's the best option we have." Dr. Barnes added a critical component. "I need to try psychological intervention first. Give me 10 minutes to see if I can talk her down from the paralysis. If she can regain voluntary muscle control, she can help with the extraction, and we reduce the injury risk significantly." Captain Norton nodded. "You've got 10 minutes. But if there's no improvement, we pull her out whether she's responsive or not. We can't leave her in there indefinitely." Dr. Barnes lay down at the entrance to the compression, positioning herself so her voice would carry to Sarah. She began speaking in a calm, measured tone, using techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy and crisis intervention. "Sarah, I know you're terrified right now. I know this feels like your worst nightmare. But I need you to listen to my voice. Your body has shut down as a protection response. It's trying to protect you from overwhelming fear. But you're not in danger from the cave. The cave is stable. The real danger is staying immobile. I need you to help me help you." No response from Sarah. Dr. Barnes continued. "Sarah, I want you to focus on one small thing. Don't think about the cave. Don't think about the walls. Just think about your right big toe. That's all. Just your right big toe. I want you to try to move it. Just a tiny movement. Can you do that for me?" She waited. Still no response. But Dr. Barnes was patient. She'd dealt with conversion disorder before. Sometimes it took persistent, repeated prompting to break through the psychological barrier. For 10 minutes, Dr. Barnes spoke continuously to Sarah, using various techniques. She tried cognitive reframing. The passage isn't trapping you. It's just rock. It can't hurt you. She tried distraction. Tell me about your favorite place. Where do you feel safest? Imagine you're there now. She tried direct commands. Sarah, you need to move your toes. Right now. Move your toes. And she tried reassurance. You're going to survive this. In a few hours, you'll be out of this cave and safe, I promise you. At the 10-minute mark, Dr. Barnes saw something. The slightest movement of Sarah's right foot. Just a twitch, barely perceptible, but movement. Sarah, did you just move your toe? Do it again. Show me you can do it. Another small movement. Dr. Barnes felt a surge of hope. She's responding. Keep talking to her. Keep that connection. She turned to Captain Norton. She's got some voluntary control. Give me 5 more minutes. I think I can bring her out of this. Dr. Barnes intensified her efforts. Sarah, you just moved your toe. That means you're not paralyzed. Your body is working. Now I need you to move your whole foot. Flex your ankle. You can do this. 1 movement at a time. Sarah's foot moved, a more deliberate flexion this time. Yes, that's it. Now the other foot. Show me you can move both feet. Both feet moved. Dr. Barnes was breaking through the conversion disorder, giving Sarah's conscious mind back control over her body. Now the legs, Sarah. Bend your knee. Just a little bit. You're doing amazing. Slow progress, but progress. Sarah's left knee bent slightly, her leg drawing up a few inches before straightening again. Excellent. Now I need you to try to slide backward. Use your feet to push against the rock and slide yourself backward toward me. Just an inch. You can do it. For the first time in over an hour, Sarah's voice emerged, weak and trembling. I can't. I'm stuck. Her speech was slurred, her vocal cords stiff from screaming earlier, but she was verbal. That was enormous progress. Dr. Barnes responded immediately. You're not stuck. The passage is tight, but you fit through it going forward, which means you can fit going backward. I need you to trust me. Push with your feet, slide backward. I'll guide you the whole way. Sarah tried. Her feet pressed against the rock floor, her muscles finally responding to her commands, and she moved backward. 2 inches, then she stopped, panic rising again. I can't breathe. The walls. Dr. Barnes cut her off firmly. You can breathe. You're breathing right now. I can hear you talking. The walls aren't touching your chest. That's your anxiety talking, not reality. Keep moving. Backward, inch by inch. You're going to make it out. The extraction process was agonizingly slow. For every few inches of backward progress, Sarah would stop, panic threatening to overwhelm her again, and Dr. Barnes would have to talk her through it. Focus on my voice. You're moving towards safety. Every inch backward is an inch closer to freedom. Keep going. By 1:45 p.m., Sarah had moved about 5 feet backward, emerging from the narrowest part of the compression into the slightly wider section. Captain Norton made the decision to accelerate the process. Officer Cooper crawled forward and managed to reach Sarah's feet. With Dr. Barnes continuing her psychological support, Cooper carefully fitted the ankle harness onto Sarah's feet, tightening it securely. Sarah, we're going to help you now. You're going to feel a gentle pull on your feet. Don't fight it. Just relax your muscles and let us guide you backward. Sarah's response was barely audible. Okay, please, just get me out. The pulley system engaged, 3 rescuers on the rope applying steady pressure. Sarah's body began sliding backward slowly but steadily. Dr. Barnes kept up the verbal support. You're moving. You're coming out. Focus on my voice. You're safe. Keep breathing. 10 feet remaining, then 8 feet, then 5. At 2:03 p.m., Sarah's head emerged from the compression passage. Hands reached for her immediately, dozens of hands, pulling her out into the larger chamber, supporting her, wrapping her in emergency blankets. Sarah was out of the passage, but she was far from okay. She was shaking violently, her skin cold and clammy, her breathing still rapid. Dr. Barnes immediately began assessing her mental state. "Sarah, you're out. You're safe. Can you look at me?" Sarah's eyes, which had been squeezed shut, opened slowly. She looked at Dr. Barnes and burst into sobs. "I couldn't move. I tried to move and I couldn't. I thought I was going to die." Dr. Barnes held her hand. "You had a severe panic attack that caused temporary paralysis. It's called conversion disorder. Your body shut down to protect you from overwhelming stress. But it's temporary. You're already recovering. You're going to be okay." But getting Sarah out of the compression was only the first challenge. They still had to get her out of the cave entirely. She'd have to crawl back through all the passages they'd navigated to reach this point, including several sections that, while not as tight as the compression, were still confined and claustrophobic. In her current psychological state, even wide passages might trigger another panic attack. Captain Norton made the decision to sedate Sarah. Officer Cooper prepared a mild sedative, midazolam, commonly used in rescue situations to calm panicked patients. "Sarah, we're going to give you medication to help you stay calm while we move you out of the cave. It's going to make you drowsy and relaxed. Is that okay?" Sarah nodded, desperate for anything that would help. The injection was administered, and within minutes, Sarah's breathing slowed, her muscles relaxed, and her awareness became fuzzy and distant. The sedation helped, but it didn't eliminate Sarah's awareness completely. She existed in a fog, conscious enough to feel the cave walls around her, to register movement as the rescue team guided her backward through passages, but not conscious enough to fully panic. It was like experiencing the extraction through a filter, the terror muted but still present. The rescue team moved her carefully, essentially dragging her limp body through the crawl spaces, protecting her head with hands and padding, talking to her constantly to maintain some level of awareness. Amanda crawled alongside Sarah the entire way out, holding her hand, whispering apologies and encouragement. Sarah's grip on Amanda's hand would occasionally tighten when they went through tighter sections, her drugged mind still registering the confinement, even if it couldn't fully process the fear. "I'm sorry," Amanda kept repeating. "I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have let you say no. This is all my fault." The extraction from the cave took 90 minutes. What had been a 30-minute trip into the cave became a 3-hour ordeal getting out. They emerged from the cave entrance at 3:45 p.m., more than 5 hours after Sarah had entered the compression. The late afternoon sunlight hit Sarah's face and she began crying again, tears streaming down her mud-streaked cheeks. "Sky," she mumbled through the sedation. "Can see sky." The rescue team carried her to a waiting ambulance. Paramedics immediately began a full assessment. Physically, Sarah was relatively unharmed. She had abrasions on her elbows and knees from crawling through the cave, some bruising on her shoulders and hips from being pulled through the compression, and significant muscle soreness from the extended period of rigid tension. But nothing broken, no serious injuries. Her vital signs were concerning, though. Blood pressure elevated at 145/95, heart rate still fast at 110 beats per minute despite the sedation, respiratory rate at 24, all indicating her body was still in fight-or-flight mode even though the immediate danger had passed. Psychologically, the damage was severe. Dr. Barnes rode with Sarah in the ambulance to the hospital, continuing to monitor her mental state as the sedation began to wear off. As Sarah became more lucid, the reality of what had happened started to sink in. Her worst fear had come true. She'd been trapped in a confined space, had lost control of her own body, had been completely helpless. For someone with claustrophobia, this wasn't just a bad experience. It was traumatic validation of every fear she'd ever had about enclosed spaces. Sarah was taken to Virginia Regional Medical Center, about 45 minutes from the cave. In the emergency room, she was evaluated by Dr. Michael Stevens, an emergency physician who'd seen his share of cave rescue patients. He ordered a full workup, x-rays to check for fractures, blood work to check for electrolyte imbalances from the hyperventilation, EKG to ensure the stress hadn't damaged her heart. Everything came back relatively normal. Physically, Sarah would recover within days. But Dr. Stevens knew from experience that the psychological recovery would take much, much longer. Dr. Barnes stayed to conduct a psychiatric evaluation. Sarah was now fully conscious, the sedation worn off, and the reality of her situation was hitting her hard. She couldn't stop crying. She was experiencing flashbacks, vivid sensory memories of being trapped in the compression, the feel of the rock pressing against her shoulders, the inability to move, the absolute certainty that she was going to die. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that passage. She started hyperventilating again, even in the spacious hospital room, her phobic brain unable to distinguish between the cave and her current environment. Dr. Barnes explained what had happened to Sarah, both the immediate crisis and the likely long-term effects. What you experienced is called conversion disorder, also known as functional neurological disorder. It's when severe psychological stress manifests as physical symptoms, in your case, paralysis. Your conscious mind wanted to escape, but your body literally couldn't move. This is more common than most people realize, especially in situations where someone feels trapped with no way out. Sarah struggled to process this information. So, my mind did this to me? I paralyzed myself? Dr. Barnes shook her head. It's not that simple. Your brain was trying to protect you from unbearable stress. When fight or flight isn't possible, when you can't physically escape, the brain sometimes shuts down motor function as a last-ditch protective mechanism. It's not voluntary, and it's not a sign of weakness. It's a neurological response to trauma. But the conversion disorder was only part of Sarah's psychological damage. Dr. Barnes had to deliver more difficult news. Sarah, I need to be honest with you about what comes next. You've experienced severe trauma that has directly validated your worst fears. This is likely going to make your claustrophobia significantly worse, not better. You may develop PTSD with intrusive memories, flashbacks, and panic attacks. You may find that spaces that didn't trigger you before will now be unbearable. Elevators, cars, crowded rooms, anything that feels even slightly confining might become problematic. Sarah felt her chest tighten at these words. So going into that cave didn't cure my phobia. It made it worse. Dr. Barnes nodded sadly. Exposure therapy can be effective for phobias, but only when done gradually, with proper therapeutic support, and most critically, with the patient in full control. What happened to you today was the opposite of therapeutic exposure. It was traumatic exposure, which reinforces phobias rather than treating them. I'm sorry, but yes, your claustrophobia is likely much worse now than it was before. Sarah was admitted to the hospital overnight for observation. They wanted to monitor her psychological state, ensure she didn't become suicidal or self-harming, and give her time to stabilize before sending her home. Amanda stayed with her, sleeping in a chair beside Sarah's bed, consumed by guilt. Every time Sarah woke from fitful sleep, gasping and sweating from nightmares of being trapped, Amanda was there. Sarah, you're safe. You're in a hospital. You're not in the cave. But the reassurances only helped marginally. In the middle of the night, Sarah finally spoke more than a few words to Amanda. Why did you make me go? Amanda felt the words like a knife. I didn't mean to make you. I genuinely thought it would help. I thought if you could just do it once and see it wasn't so bad, you'd feel empowered. Sarah's response was quiet, but firm. You knew I was claustrophobic. I told you for years how bad it was. But you didn't believe me. You thought I was exaggerating. You thought I just needed to try harder. Amanda started to protest, but stopped. Because Sarah was right. Amanda had minimized her friend's phobia, had treated it as something that could be overcome with willpower and positive thinking, and that belief had nearly killed Sarah. Sarah was discharged the next morning with prescriptions for anti-anxiety medication and a referral to a trauma therapist. Dr. Barnes provided her with resources for PTSD treatment and specific recommendations for therapists who specialized in phobias and trauma. "You need to start therapy as soon as possible," Dr. Barnes emphasized. "The longer you wait, the more entrenched the trauma responses become." Sarah nodded numbly, barely processing the information. She just wanted to go home, to be in her own space, to never think about caves or tight spaces or enclosed areas ever again. But going home proved more difficult than Sarah expected. Amanda drove her home. Sarah couldn't drive herself. She was too shaky and disoriented. And when they pulled into the parking garage of Sarah's apartment building, Sarah had her first post-cave panic attack. The parking garage, which she'd used hundreds of times without issue, suddenly felt suffocating. The concrete walls, the low ceiling, the dim lighting all triggered immediate flashbacks to the cave. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't get out of the car. Amanda had to drive back out of the garage and park on the street. They walked to Sarah's apartment building, but then faced another problem. Sarah's apartment was on the 8th floor, and she couldn't take the elevator. The elevator was spacious, well-lit, safe. But to Sarah's traumatized brain, it was another box, another confined space, another potential trap. She tried to step inside and immediately backed out, hyperventilating. I can't do it. Can't go in there." Amanda suggested the stairs, but 8 flights of stairs were beyond Sarah's physical capability given her exhaustion and muscle soreness. They were stuck. Finally, Amanda called Sarah's parents, who lived an hour away. They came and got Sarah, taking her to their house where she could stay in a ground-floor guest room with no need for elevators or confined spaces. Over the following weeks, the full extent of Sarah's psychological damage became apparent. She couldn't ride in cars because they felt too enclosed. She couldn't go into bathrooms with the door closed. She couldn't wear turtlenecks or tight clothing. She couldn't be in any room without a visible, unobstructed exit. She slept with all the lights on and couldn't tolerate blankets because they made her feel trapped. She had nightmares every single night, always variations of the same theme. Trapped, unable to move, suffocating, dying. Sarah started intensive therapy with Dr. Ellen Morrison, a psychologist specializing in PTSD and phobias. The therapy was long and difficult. They used cognitive behavioral techniques, exposure therapy done extremely gradually and with Sarah in full control, EMDR, eye movement, desensitization and reprocessing, to process the traumatic memories, and medication to manage the anxiety. Progress was measured in tiny increments. After 3 weeks, Sarah could ride in a car for short distances if the windows were open. After 6 weeks, she could use a bathroom with the door closed for brief periods. After 3 months, she could wear a light sweater without panicking. But some spaces remained completely impossible. Elevators, MRI machines, small rooms without windows, crowded places where she couldn't easily leave. These triggers were so deeply ingrained now that even years of therapy might never fully resolve them. Dr. Morrison explained that Sarah's brain had been rewired by the trauma. The cave experience had created neural pathways that associated confined spaces with life-threatening danger. These pathways couldn't be completely erased, only managed and worked around. Sarah's relationship with Amanda was permanently damaged, not destroyed. Sarah didn't hate Amanda, understood that her friend had meant well, but changed fundamentally. The trust was broken. Sarah couldn't forget that Amanda had pressured her into a situation that traumatized her, had minimized her legitimate fears, had prioritized adventure over Sarah's well-being. They saw each other occasionally, but the easy friendship they'd once shared was gone, replaced by awkwardness and unspoken resentment. Trevor and Melissa each reached out to Sarah once to apologize and check on her recovery. Sarah appreciated the gestures but couldn't maintain contact with anyone who reminded her of the cave. She needed to move forward, not be constantly reminded of her worst day. She asked them politely not to contact her again, and they respected her wishes. The friend group that had gone into Serpent's Crawl Cave that September morning essentially dissolved, fractured by trauma and guilt. 6 months after the incident, Sarah attempted to return to work. She was an elementary school teacher, a job she'd loved. But the school building presented numerous challenges. The staff bathroom was small and windowless. She couldn't use it. The supply closet where she needed to get materials was tiny. She couldn't enter it. During fire drills, when students had to line up in tight hallways, she had panic attacks. Her principal was understanding and accommodating, but ultimately, Sarah realized she couldn't continue teaching in a traditional school building. The architecture was too triggering. She reluctantly took a leave of absence, which eventually became permanent resignation. Losing her career was devastating. Teaching had been Sarah's identity, her passion, her purpose. But the claustrophobia, exponentially worse after the cave, made it impossible to function in the school environment. She transitioned to online tutoring, working from home where she could control her environment completely. It paid less and was less fulfilling, but it was manageable. Her entire life had contracted, becoming smaller and more restricted, limited by her psychological damage. 1 year after the cave incident, Sarah agreed to speak with a journalist from a caving safety publication who wanted to write about her experience. The interview was difficult, forcing Sarah to articulate her trauma and its consequences. But she felt it was important to share her story. "People need to understand that phobias are real," Sarah told the journalist. "They're not just nervousness or being dramatic. When someone says they're claustrophobic, believe them. Don't try to cure them by forcing exposure. Don't assume you know better than they do about their own psychological limits. Because what happened to me is what happens when you ignore someone's clearly stated boundaries." The article was published with the title, "The Danger of Forced Exposure: One Woman's Cautionary Tale About Phobias and Caving." It was widely shared in the caving community and sparked important conversations about screening potential cavers for psychological issues, respecting people's limits, and understanding that not everyone is suited for every activity. Several caving organizations updated their safety guidelines to include psychological risk factors and to explicitly state that people with severe claustrophobia should not cave, regardless of how much friends or family might encourage them. Paul Hendricks, the cave rescue equipment specialist who'd been involved in Sarah's rescue, used her case in training materials. He showed photos of the compression passage, explained the psychology of conversion disorder, and emphasized the importance of psychological first aid in rescue situations. What saved Sarah Mitchell wasn't just the technical rope work or the extraction equipment, Hendricks told trainees. It was Dr. Barnes's psychological intervention that gave Sarah back control of her body. In rescue situations involving panic or psychological crisis, the mental component is as important as the physical. 2 years after the incident, Sarah's life had stabilized into a new, more limited normal. She lived in a ground-floor apartment with large windows and multiple exits. She worked from home, tutoring students online. She had a new therapist who specialized in long-term PTSD management. She took medication daily to manage her anxiety. She'd learned to cope with her worsened claustrophobia, to work around the limitations it imposed. But she was acutely aware of everything she'd lost. Her teaching career, her independence, her freedom to go places and do things without constant anxiety, her friendship with Amanda, her sense of safety in the world. She still had nightmares about the compression, though less frequently than in the first year. She still had flashbacks triggered by confined spaces or certain textures of rock. She still experienced panic attacks, though she'd learned techniques to manage them before they became debilitating. She would likely deal with PTSD symptoms for the rest of her life. The trauma had fundamentally changed her brain's structure and function, changes that might never fully reverse. But there were small victories, too. After 18 months of gradual exposure therapy, Sarah could ride in an elevator for 2 floors if someone was with her. After 2 years, she could sit in a car with the doors locked for short trips. She'd learned to identify her triggers and avoid or prepare for them. She'd built a support system of people who understood her limitations and respected them. She was surviving, even if she wasn't thriving. 3 years after Serpent's Crawl Cave, Sarah received an unexpected message from Trevor. He wrote to tell her that he'd stopped leading beginner caving trips after her accident. "I realized I'd been cavalier about psychological screening," he wrote. "I assumed that if someone was physically capable of caving, they could handle it mentally. Your experience taught me that's not true. I'm sorry for my role in what happened to you. I should have done more to ensure you were ready for that cave. Or better yet, should have respected your hesitation and told Amanda that pressuring you was wrong." Sarah appreciated the apology but didn't respond immediately. It took her several days to compose a reply. She wrote, "What happened wasn't entirely your fault, Trevor. Multiple people made mistakes that day, me included. I should have said no more firmly. I should have trusted my instincts. But you're right that trip leaders have a responsibility to screen participants, not just physically but psychologically. I hope my experience makes future caving trips safer for others." She hit send and felt a small sense of closure. Amanda had also changed in the 3 years since the cave. The guilt had driven her to therapy, where she'd worked through her own trauma from watching her best friend suffer. She'd learned about boundaries, consent, and the danger of pressuring people to do things they're uncomfortable with, even with good intentions. She'd stopped caving entirely, unable to enjoy it knowing what the activity had cost Sarah. She'd reached out to Sarah multiple times, always respectfully, always giving Sarah control over whether and how they interacted. Slowly, painfully, they'd rebuilt a friendship. Not what it had been before, but something new, based on hard lessons learned. 5 years after the incident, Sarah had achieved a measure of peace. She'd accepted that she would always live with claustrophobia, that it would always limit her life in ways that hurt. But she'd also discovered strengths she hadn't known she possessed: resilience, adaptability, the ability to advocate for her own needs. She'd become an online advocate for people with phobias, running a blog and support group for others dealing with similar challenges. She shared her story not to blame anyone, but to educate, to help people understand the reality of phobias and the importance of respecting psychological boundaries. Her message was consistent. Phobias are not character flaws. They're not excuses or exaggerations. They're real, valid physiological responses that have deep roots in brain structure and function. When someone tells you they have a phobia, believe them. Don't try to cure them with exposure unless they ask for help, and it's done with professional guidance. Don't assume your encouragement or enthusiasm can overcome their fear, because sometimes when you push someone past their limits, you don't help them overcome their fear. You traumatize them in ways they may never fully recover from. Sarah never went near a cave again. She couldn't even look at photos of caves without feeling her chest tighten. The hiking trails she'd once enjoyed were now off-limits if they involved any rock features or overhangs that reminded her of enclosed spaces. Her world had become smaller, more carefully controlled, more limited. This was the cost of ignoring a phobia, of believing that fear could be conquered through willpower and positive thinking. This was what happened when good intentions collided with psychological reality. But Sarah was alive. Despite spending hours trapped in her own paralyzed body, despite the overwhelming terror and helplessness, she'd survived. Many people with conversion disorder in confined spaces don't survive because the paralysis prevents breathing or because the panic causes cardiac arrest. Sarah had been extraordinarily lucky that Dr. Barnes reached her when she did, that the psychological intervention worked, that her body hadn't completely shut down. She lived with limitations, but she lived. The compression passage in Serpent's Crawl cave is still there, unchanged and indifferent. Other cavers still go through it successfully, experiencing a brief uncomfortable squeeze and emerging safely on the other side. The cave doesn't care who enters it or what they fear. It's just rock and darkness, neutral and eternal. But for Sarah Mitchell, that 18-inch passage represented something much more than geology. It represented the moment when her worst fear came true, when her psychological limits were exceeded, when her body betrayed her and left her trapped and helpless. It represented trauma that would echo through the rest of her life. If you're reading this story and thinking about taking a claustrophobic friend caving to help them overcome their fear, please don't. If you're claustrophobic and feeling pressured to try activities that involve confined spaces, please refuse. Phobias exist for a reason. They're your brain's way of saying this situation is dangerous for you specifically, even if it's safe for others. Respecting that warning isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Sarah Mitchell learned this lesson in the hardest way possible. Learn from her experience instead of repeating her mistake. The cave is patient. The fear is real. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no and walk away.